tariff walls are coming down, but not for the people who need it most. The Biden administration just slashed Trump-era tariffs on Chinese goods, dropping some duties from an eye-popping 145% to much lower rates. On paper, it looks like a win, but small American businesses say they're still trapped, buried in hidden costs, broken supply chains, and Chinese countermeasures. So why is this tariff rollback turning into a false hope for Main Street America? Stay with us. The real economic battlefield is just beginning. In early 2024, the Biden administration made headlines by rolling back a portion of the steep tariffs originally imposed during the Trump-era trade war with China. The most eye-catching change? Some tariffs that were as high as 145% on certain Chinese goods, especially in the steel, aluminum, and tech sectors, were slashed significantly. For the first time in years, it seemed like relief might be on the horizon. But for small business owners across the U.S., the details told a different story. While a few sectors benefited, including electric vehicles, batteries, and some consumer electronics, the majority of goods critical to small importers remained under heavy duties. For example, tools, machine parts, and key raw materials still face tariffs ranging between 25% and 60% depending on the classification. And the process is more complicated than ever. Instead of a blanket repeal, the Biden administration opted for targeted reductions based on economic impact, supply chain vulnerability, and national security. This means that only specific product codes saw changes, leaving thousands of small business owners scrambling to find out whether their shipments qualify or not. To make matters worse, some goods are only eligible for temporary exemptions, which expire within a year unless reapproved. The bureaucracy is intense, the rules are unclear, and the cost of non-compliance can be devastating. In short, while the headlines tout a trade thaw, the actual impact for many American small businesses is minimal. The big players may be breathing easier, but the ones truly in the trenches, the importers, retailers, and distributors who rely on low-engine goods, are still carrying the weight of a trade war that never really ended. For many American small businesses, the tariff rollback came too little, too late, and in the wrong places. While the Biden administration reduced or removed duties on a small number of goods, the vast majority of essential imports for small operations remain taxed at punishing levels. Take Kevin Tran, who runs a small auto parts distribution company in Texas. For years, he imported brake pads, bearings, and filters from China. Under the Trump tariffs, his costs shot up nearly 60%. When the Biden rollback was announced, he thought relief was finally coming. But none of his products made the exemption list. His latest shipment? Still taxed at 35%. It's like they handed out umbrellas after the flood, he says. This is a common story. Most small businesses don't have the resources or legal help to navigate the constantly changing list of tariff exemptions and product codes. The process for applying for exclusions is slow, bureaucratic, and often favors larger corporations that can hire trade compliance teams. Even for those whose products do qualify, the damage has already been done. Small importers have spent years dealing with skyrocketing shipping and logistics costs, unpredictable customs delays, forced price hikes which have driven away loyal customers, shifting supply chains including costly moves to Vietnam, India, or Mexico, decisions they can't easily reverse. Worse, many of these businesses operate on razor-thin profit margins. They don't have the capital to ride out extended periods of uncertainty. Some have had to lay off staff, close locations, or reduce product offerings to stay alive. And let's not forget, these aren't massive corporations. These are the hardware store owners, the small electronics resellers, the mom-and-pop retailers who keep communities running. So when government officials announce tariff relief, it often feels like empty words. The numbers may have dropped on paper, but for small businesses on the front lines, the weight of the trade war never really lifted. They're still paying for a battle they didn't start, and they're paying with their futures. While the U.S. publicly reduced certain tariffs, China's reaction was far more subtle and strategic. Beijing didn't mirror the rollback with equal generosity. Instead, it maintained many of its own tariffs on key American exports, including agricultural goods, semiconductors, and industrial components. But that's not all. Rather than relying solely on visible tariffs, China has shifted toward non-tariff barriers, policies that are harder to track but just as damaging. These include stricter product inspections, new certification requirements, unpredictable customs delays, national security reviews targeting U.S. firms. These quiet tactics are creating major roadblocks for American small exporters trying to reach the Chinese market. In effect, even if the U.S. is opening the door, China is quietly reinforcing its own walls. For Chinese exporters, however, the story is very different. With U.S. tariffs now lower in select areas, Chinese companies can undercut domestic U.S. suppliers, regaining a competitive edge in categories like electronics, tools, and consumer goods. Large U.S. corporations often have the flexibility to adapt, moving operations to Southeast Asia, reclassifying products, or absorbing short-term losses, but small businesses don't have that luxury. Many rely on very specific Chinese parts and partners. So when barriers stay in place or new ones pop up, they get hit the hardest. In short, China's response isn't about headlines, it's about quiet advantage. While Washington plays politics with tariffs, Beijing is playing the long game, and small American businesses are the ones stuck in the middle. The politicians in Washington, the tariff rollback is a strategic move, a way to cool tensions with China while signaling support for U.S. industry. But for small businesses, it feels like just another photo op with no real change on the ground. The Biden administration frames the reduction as a balanced approach, lowering inflationary pressures without appearing soft on China. Meanwhile, Republican critics claim the move undermines American leverage and rewards a rival power. Both sides are scoring political points, but few are actually listening to the people caught in the crossfire. And those people? They're the local manufacturers, importers, and family-run operations who rely on stable trade policies to survive. Many of them are now skeptical of any promises from Washington. They've heard about tariff reform before, but instead of relief, they got red tape, complex exemption forms, and inconsistent enforcement. In reality, consumer prices haven't fallen, and inflation continues to squeeze businesses and households alike. The rollback hasn't restored disrupted supply chains or made it easier to access Chinese components. It hasn't brought back lost customers or covered the costs of years of inflated import fees. Worse still, many small firms feel ignored by both parties. Tariff policy seems written by and for the biggest players, with no input from the people actually doing the importing. What's left is a growing sense of disillusionment. The economic headlines say tariff relief, but on Main Street, the pain persists. This isn't about politics anymore. For small businesses, this is about survival. And right now, they're still losing. For small businesses across America, the path forward is uncertain, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If the current trade environment continues, many may be forced to scale down, pivot away from imports, or shut down altogether. Years of instability have taken a toll on their margins, and the most recent rollback, while symbolic, hasn't given them the real breathing room they need. Worse, there's growing concern about a second wave of trade tensions. As the U.S. heads into a contentious election season, tariff policy could become a political weapon again. Both parties may escalate rhetoric or reverse course entirely, depending on public pressure, inflation numbers, or foreign policy shifts. That uncertainty alone can freeze investment and paralyze planning for smaller firms. Meanwhile, China is quietly strengthening its global trade relationships, offering incentives to Southeast Asian nations and African partners while maintaining restrictions on U.S. goods. In this new global landscape, American small businesses may find themselves increasingly isolated and outmatched, lacking both the government support and the international flexibility enjoyed by larger corporations. But it's not too late. Trade experts say that real relief is still possible, with streamlined exemption processes, targeted subsidies, and greater inclusion of small business voices in policy decisions. The question is, will Washington listen? Because the tariffs may not be 145% anymore, but for thousands of importers and exporters trying to stay afloat, the weight feels just as heavy. This isn't just a trade issue, it's a test of how the U.S. economy values its small players in a global storm, and right now they're still fighting to be heard.